we wanted to be as open as possible with the vote. Having it on the current trajectory last night, it was going into the wee hours of the morning, and I don't think that for all that we've talked about, that wasn't the appropriate way to vote. I think we decided to work with the House and ask that they postpone and make sure that it was done in the light of day. Speaker's currently having a conversation with them to talk about where that vote count stands. He's working with the members. You know, the president made a sell. He had the Tuesday group here. There were 17 members here. 16 walked out as a yes. I think we've had, you know, a group of members that we've continued to have a conversation with and try to make. Frankly, at this point, it's not a question of negotiating anymore. It's understanding the greater good that's at hand. The president understands this is it. So.
Just to be clear, I mean, if this fails today, is the president done with
so negative? Well, that's what you're hearing. Well, I haven't heard that yet. So why don't we continue with a very positive, optimistic Friday? The sun's coming out. I feel really good. You know, so we're going to continue to work as late as we can to get the votes. And as I said, the upside is that, you know, we continue to pick up votes. People continue to say that they want to be us. The question is, can we get to 216? But make no mistake about it. I mean, the president made it clear last night. This is it. You know, you have an opportunity to do what you've told the American people, the commitment that we as a party have made. But this is your chance to do what we've done. We've listened, we've incorporated, we've updated in every way possible. I don't think, when you look at legislative efforts, I think the president has given it his all. And I think it shocked a lot of people, frankly, how very, very detail-oriented, how personal it was for him, calling members, you know, as early as 6 in the morning, going to 11 o'clock at night the last several nights, sitting down, meeting after meeting with them, coming back and revising it, having his team back and forth. Everything's out there. And I think each of these members needs to make that decision, whether or not they believe that they've, you know, at some point you can only do so much is what I would honestly tell you. And I think everything that we can possibly do to listen to members, to get their concerns in this piece of legislation, to make it as strong as possible for the American people, has been done.
In general, is the White House happy with how Paul Ryan has handled this?
I think the Speaker has done everything he can. He's worked really closely with the President. I think at the end of the day, you know, I said this yesterday, you can't force people to vote. But I think we've given them every single reason to fulfill every pledge that they've made, and I think this is the right thing to do.
Well, then with Obamacare continuing, and what does he say?
No, he's not. I mean, of course he's not.
With a promise that he would repeal this.
I mean, I'm not even sure where to start with that. No, he's not, which is why he's literally put as much effort as he has into repealing this. And so, but he's made it clear that this is our moment. This is our opportunity to do it. But it is now up to members to make that decision whether or not they want to be part of this effort to repeal Obamacare. And if they don't, and I think for a lot of the you know, you saw the president's tweet this morning, I think for a lot of these members who life is an important issue as well, this is your opportunity. But it's ultimately them that have to go down on the floor and cast that vote. And I think that, you know, we've been able to cast a bunch of votes over the past couple of years when you knew a president wouldn't sign it. You now have a president that's going to sign the bill if you pass it.
Thanks. Without prejudging the outcome of the
Thank
vote.
you.
Does the president in any way regret pursuing health care first, given how complicated it has been?
No. I think if you think about it legislatively, in order to maximize, and I know this, for most people it doesn't make a ton of sense, but the savings that you achieve through the first reconciliation of health care, which we're doing through the 2017 budget process, which still continues, allows us to utilize the savings in that process to maximize additional tax reform measures that will start in the FY 2018 reconciliation process. So while that sounds like a ton of inside baseball gobbledygook, the reality is in order to maximize tax reform, both on the corporate side to make our businesses more competitive and to give individuals, especially middle-class Americans, more tax relief, doing this in that way maximizes the amount of savings that you can use for the second reconciliation package, which would be tax reform. Doing it the first way, you can do, but again, you're not going to achieve the full potential that you could if you did it the way that is
Was
happening
it
now.
his initial ask to do healthcare first, or did House Speaker Paul Ryan say,
I think this was
the
something
White-
that during the
Okay.
transition, we sat down and gamed out in coordination with the House in terms of what should go first and why. But again, it's not a question of just what should go first. It's a question of if you don't do it first, do you lose some of the potential and savings that you would achieve through the second reconciliation?
Would it have been wiser to try to work with the Freedom Caucus, for example, on something like infrastructure reform to build up some goodwill?
No, I
with
think,
that
look,
caucus
Kristen,
and
we've
then
talked
come
about
back
this
to
since 2010. Every Republican, with the exception of probably a handful, has campaigned from dog catcher on up that they would do everything they could to repeal and replace Obamacare. And I think to get in and say, hey, you should have done something else, wouldn't be fair to the American people who have said, okay, I'll vote for you, but I want you to fulfill this pledge.
Sean, as the deal maker, why does the president feel that this take it or leave it approach is the right one on healthcare?
Because I think he has done, at some point you've listened to everybody, you've gotten all other ideas, you've gone back and forth, you've incorporated them, you've assuaged them in some way, shape, or form. You've updated the bill, and a lot of times it's the same people coming back over and over again. And you go, okay, I've listened to you, I've taken your ideas. At some point, we either have a deal or we don't. And I think that's where the president finally drew the line and said, we've been having this discussion, we've had the meetings, and we've done everything possible to address the concerns and ideas and opinions that people have brought up. And that, I don't think you can say it any simpler. I think he has done every single thing possible, and you end up at some point finding yourself going around and around and saying, okay, let's call the vote.
But isn't there a political cost to a collapse, potentially?
I think that at some point there's a political cost to dragging this out as well and saying, let's just keep letting it go. And I think that's where, we've came to a decision that it had gotten as far as it can go. Jen.
Treasury Secretary Mnuchin was talking this morning about doing tax reform by the August recess.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that that's a reasonable timeline? And why the rush? Are there any lessons learned from this healthcare debate that would say it should
again,
be
I
done
think
quickly?
tax reform is something that we've talked about. There's plenty of time. I think it's a goal, and I think it's an ambitious one, and I think it's one that we're going to try to stick to. But let's get by today, and then we'll lay it out. But I think tax reform is something that the president is very committed to. If you've seen him very publicly in the last couple open events talk about how excited he is to move on once this is done to tax reform, because he understands both sides of this, that the business piece of this, we are so uncompetitive when it comes to our other worldly competitors in terms of our tax rate. And that when we have these discussions about keeping companies from either shipping jobs overseas or growing, bringing back jobs to America, the two things that come up over and over again are our tax rate and our regulatory system. And I think he understands that on the tax front, we can be a lot more competitive with the rest of the world in growing American jobs here at home and, frankly, expanding manufacturing if we lower that. But also that the American middle class desperately needs and wants a tax break. And I think the more that we can do with that. So this is something that I think we're going to be continuing to work on, and we'll have more on that later.
About Keystone, what changed? It seemed like it took forever in covering the Obama administration for this thing to finally get over the finish line. It never did, and relatively quickly, less than 65 days in, it's finally made its way over the finish line. What changed, especially with respect to the State Department's view of the Keystone XL pipeline? And is it your opinion that it would be good to hear from the president, win, lose, or draw, after what we learned today vis-a-vis healthcare reform?
So simply put, on Keystone, it was a priority. The president came in, he signed an executive order on it. He had talked about it during the campaign, and he made it a priority. He made it a priority for his team here at the White House to get it done. Not only the jobs, but incorporating U.S. Steel, and there was a lot of things. But I don't think it's any simpler than he made it a priority for him, his team, this administration, the Department of State, and others, and that's it. He recognizes the importance of that to both energy and to jobs in our economy, and simply got it done. And I'll leave it up to the president once we go forward to see how it goes.
So if you know the vote counts are right now, and there's no discussion of pulling the healthcare bill, and it gets closer to 3:30 and you still don't have the votes, why vote?
I'm not going to discuss our strategy. I mean,
But you see what I'm saying?
I
Like, you know,
do.
If you know what the votes are and you know that you don't have the votes for it to pass, why vote?
I understand your question. I'm just not going to comment on our strategy. I think the president and the speaker are going to have a discussion about where those votes are and what some of the members' needs are, and we'll take it from there.
If it does pass today, you talked a lot about this being done in 3 phases, today being
Right.
phase 1. Phase 2 and phase 3, one of the problems I think is that this is not information that is in scorable form. The steps that Secretary Price might take and then what may
Right.
end up in this final bill. Is there
Well, I don't know
anything
yet.
being
At some
done-
point, maybe it can be. I mean,
Can you put the administrative steps that the Secretary
I don't
Price-
know. That's.
Is that something that's being attempted to be done? Because that's the kind
I
of
think right
information
now
I
we're
think that
kind
would
of
want.
focused on the vote, but I think that we'll have either OMB or CBO take a look at not just the other elements, but can you look at it in its totality? I don't know but that's a good question that I can have the OMB folks address potentially with the CBO folks. Thank you, guys. I'm sure we'll have some additional updates for today. Thank you.